Start of 2021, Xiaomi decided to release some of the best mid-range smartphones on the market right now. Starting off with the Redmi Note 10, the Redmi Note 10 Pro 5G, which is their budget 5G smartphone, and one of their best-selling smartphones, the Redmi Note 10 Pro. But after those releases, Poco decided to launch a gaming smartphone for the masses, which is the Poco X3 Pro. After a few months of the launching of the Poco X3 Pro, they decided to launch another new model on their lineup, which is the Poco X3 GT. And today, I'm going to do a comparison between these two smartphones, what are their advantages and disadvantages. So let's get started. Before I start off this video, I just want to let you guys know that I'm gonna use the Redmi Note 10 Pro 5G as a substitute to the Poco X3 GT, since both of them boast the same specs, they have the same size, and both of them has the same design. So let's start off with their pricing. The base model Poco X3 Pro starts at 12,990 pesos, while the Poco X3 GT doesn't have a SRP price, but usually it is priced around 14,990 pesos on its base model. Let's start off with the design of these two smartphones. The Poco X3 Pro has the same design as the Poco X3 NFC from last year, but Poco decided to add some matte finish on the sides of this phone and a glossy finish in the middle. While the Poco X3 GT has a new design which is quite the same as the Xiaomi Mi 10 Ultra from last year on the camera. Now let's go on to their similarities. Both of these phones has a IP53 rating, which is both splash and dust protected. Their back and side panels are made out of plastic. On their display, it is a IPS LCD panel with 120Hz refresh rate, and both are HDR10 certified panels. Now let's go to their UI. Both of them run under UI for Poco 12.5, which is already Android 11. And both of them has a UFS 3.1 storage, NFC available, infrared port on the top of both smartphones, and finally, side-mounted fingerprint scanner. Now let's go to the differences of these two smartphones. Starting off with the Poco X3 Pro, its display has a Gorilla Glass 6 protection, while the Poco X3 GT has a Gorilla Glass Victus protection, which can be found on higher-end smartphones like the Mi 11, Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra. Now let's go on to their display size. The Poco X3 Pro has a larger display, which is 6.67 inch, compared to the Poco X3 GT's 6.6 inch display. Now onto their processors. The Poco X3 Pro runs on Snapdragon 860, which is a 7nm chip, while the Poco X3 GT runs on the new 6nm MediaTek Dimensity 1100 5G processor. On the Poco X3 Pro, it has a hybrid slot which you can put a memory card on, while on the Poco X3 GT, it only supports dual SIM. Let's talk about the headphone jack situation on these two smartphones. Starting off with the Poco X3 Pro, the Poco X3 Pro has a built-in 3.5mm headphone jack, while the Poco X3 GT doesn't have a built-in one. But Poco has provided a adapter on its box so we can still use our wired earphones or headphones. Now let's go on to their camera setup. Starting off with the Poco X3 Pro, it has a 4-camera setup, a 48MP main camera, 8MP ultra-wide, 2MP macro, and 2MP depth sensor. While the Poco X3 GT has a triple camera setup, but a 64MP main camera, 8MP ultra-wide, and 2MP macro camera. Now let's go on to their front-facing camera. Starting off with the Poco X3 GT, it has a 16MP front camera, while the Poco X3 Pro has a 20MP front camera. Now let's go to their stereo speaker setup. Starting off with the Poco X3 GT. The Poco X3 GT's stereo speaker setup can be found on the top and the bottom of the smartphone. Both are tuned by JBL, while the Poco X3 Pro has a stereo speaker setup, but the secondary speaker is located at the front earpiece of the phone. Now on their battery capacity. The Poco X3 GT has a 5,000 mAh battery, while the Poco X3 Pro has a 5160 mAh battery. Now finally, let's go on to their charging speeds. The Poco X3 GT can support up to 67 watts charging speeds, which can go from 0 to 100 in 42 minutes as advertised. While the Poco X3 Pro has a 33 watts charger and can charge from 0 to 100 in 59 minutes as advertised. And now let's check their Antutu benchmark score. So as you can see, the differences of these two smartphones on Antutu benchmark is 200 plus thousand score, which is really a big deal, especially their price difference, which is only 2,000 pesos. Let's now check the optimization of these two smartphones on some really popular games, starting off with Call of Duty Mobile. Now on the Poco X3 GT, it can support very high graphic quality and up to only very high frame rate. But if you want to achieve max frame rate, you need to dial down your graphics on high graphics. Now here on the Poco X3 Pro, you can go up to ultra frame rate and only medium graphics quality. But if you want to set your graphics quality to very high, you need to dial down your frame rate up to max frame rate only. Same thing goes to the Poco X3 Pro, which has ultra graphics and HFR mode. From COD Mobile, let's go onto Mobile Legends. Now, you can set your graphics up to ultra graphics with HFR mode enabled. Now check the graphics quality on PUBG Mobile. Now we have the Poco X3 Pro, and as you can see, you can set up to Ultra HD graphics, which is really good, but you can set up to ultra frame rate only. And if you want to achieve extreme frame rate, you might need to dial down your graphics up to HDR graphics in order to achieve the extreme frame rate. And now let's check the PUBG graphics here on the Poco X3 GT. As you can see, you can set it up until HDR graphics, no Ultra HD graphics as of recording this video, and you can reach up to ultra frame rate only if you are set from balanced to HDR graphics. But if you dial down your graphics to smooth, you will have a extreme frame rate option right here. So even though if the Poco X3 GT has a much more powerful processor compared to the Poco X3 Pro, the reason behind this, it's because the game that isn't optimized yet for this smartphone and for this new MediaTek Dimensity chipset. And now let's go to the gaming test on this video comparison. Starting off with the Poco X3 GT running the newest Dimensity 1100 5G. So let's check our graphics settings. Now we're set on these graphics settings, as you can see here. All of them are on medium and our motion blur are turned off. As you can see, it runs smoothly but not all of the time. While panning around, you can see there is some frame drops and even stutters. But overall, it is still playable. After playing for 3 minutes, as you can see, there's a overheating warning here on the Poco X3 GT, but still, that is no problems at all. Since even though the device is heating up really fast and really hot, the performance doesn't really suffer at all. And going to the Poco X3 Pro, let us check our graphics here on Genshin Impact. As you can see, let us now set everything to medium. And as usual, we will turn off motion blur since it only drains our frame. Using our Poco X3 Pro, it performs almost the same as the Poco X3 GT, but the frame drops and stutters occur much more often. And if there is a frame drop, it drops much more compared to the Poco X3 GT. Once again, both of them are set on medium graphics. Let's test Mobile Legends on the Poco X3 GT. Now we are set on Ultra Graphics with HFR mode enabled. As you can see, it runs Mobile Legends on Ultra Graphics pretty smoothly. Now on the Poco X3 Pro, we are gonna try and test out Mobile Legends. Once again, all of the graphics are cranked to their highest settings possible, which is the same as the Poco X3 GT. As you can see, it doesn't struggle at all, running 60 frames per second. No frame drops, no stutters, everything is smooth. PUBG Mobile here on the Poco X3 Pro. As you can see, our graphics is set at HDR graphics and frame rate at extreme. And as you guys can see, it runs PUBG Mobile on HDR graphics really smoothly. No frame drops, no stutters. Smooth 60 FPS. But right now the device is actually heating up quite fast. But still, it doesn't affect the performance of this smartphone. And now here on the Poco X3 GT, PUBG Mobile, our graphics is set up to HDR graphics and on ultra frame rate. My comments here is that it is running smooth 45 FPS. Since ultra is capped at only 45 FPS and still no 60 FPS option, which is the extreme frame rate. But still, even though it runs on 45 FPS, it is still smooth and stable, no stutters, no frame drops. Here on the Poco X3 GT, on Call of Duty Mobile, our graphics is set at very high and our frame rate is set at max frame rate. As you can see, we are running Call of Duty Mobile really smooth. I'm actually really impressed by its speed, since it doesn't do any frame drop at all. Playing COD Mobile on the Poco X3 GT. Now our graphics is set at very high graphics and only very high frame rate. It still runs Call of Duty Mobile really smoothly. No frame drops, no stutters, and the phone doesn't heat up like the Poco X3 Pro. Now, let's go to my final verdict. My final verdict from both of these phones is that both of them perform great, and actually both of them are really good for its pricing. Now let's go to the Poco X3 Pro. One advantage here on the Poco X3 Pro is obviously it is much cheaper than the Poco X3 GT. And I think this is where we end on the pros here on the Poco X3 Pro. Now, let's move on to the Poco X3 GT. For 2,000 pesos more, you actually get a lot more features and much more better specs. Like the dual stereo speaker setup, as you see a while ago, and it is tuned by JBL. Not only that, but the design is brand new compared to the Poco X3 Pro. which is mostly the same design as the Poco X3 NFC from last year. Consider liking this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of these kinds of tech-related videos. And you can turn on notification bell to never miss out any of my new uploads. Bye!